Hey everyone, I'm Rather Coherent, and now that spoilers are being posted for the Drowned City, I can't help but get hyped about Arkham again and find the time to start making videos for it. The Drowned City spoiler list that I'm using is posted by Derby K on his wonderful blog, Ancient Evils. I'll have a link in the description. Now before we start talking about Marion Tavares, the new Guardian, I do want to mention, a lot of what I'll be saying might be more broadly about game design and game balance, and not specifically the cards we're seeing, so much as the ramifications of that card for the card pool, how the expansion can be designed when you have a Guardian designed like Marion. And first, let's talk about what Marion is, and then get into the thing that has my tabletop group worried. They're the Trawler, they have 2 head, 3 book, 4 fist, 3 foot. That's a very atypical Guardian stat line. Having a book this high is actually a pretty common bad thing for Guardians, where Guardians can't really leverage it super well, but they're encouraged to try in spite of that. The 3 foot's also atypical, usually they have better head. All in all, despite being like atypical and not super optimized, it's also not terrible. This is kind of exactly what you expect out of Guardians. I think if you swap the head and the foot, this is just Tommy and Roland. So not a great stat line, but not god awful. There are very few Guardians with terrible stat lines. It's pretty much just Sister Mary, I think. Well, Carson doesn't count, but I guess him too. Anyway, you have 1 fewer hand slots, is not the powerhouse you're looking for. Does make sense, admittedly. But she has a very strong ability. After you play an event during your turn, draw 1 card. Then you may play a different event, limit once per round. So first of all, just the first half of that, getting a very consistent draw trigger every turn, that's Harvey. I think Harvey is one of the best investigators in the game. And admittedly, playing an event is a lot harder to do than just drawing a card, but it's still very, very good. And then because of the second part that allows you a lot of action compression, if you have a second event that you can play, is really good. And as Guardian, just immediately, you have access to things like Soothing Melody, an event that is always available and will always be valuable to play, because at worst, it's just cycling a card into your deck, and more likely than not, the healing will matter and will allow you to take more dangerous plays or just survive if you're getting unlucky. So this is a really strong event. I don't know if this is going to be as good as Nathaniel Cho. It might inherently lead to a much more flex event-based style just because the 3 book is much better than what Cho has to offer and it's not locking you into fighting. I'm interested in Marion Tavares as a character, and I'm hyped to see them get printed. Oh, I should mention, they have 8/6 soak. It's like the most Guardian soak ever. They're not committing suicide like Roland. It's just a generally very normal thing to see for Guardians. I didn't even register that it existed the first time. Oh, I should read the star. It is a real star. +1, search the top cards of your deck for an event and draw it, shuffle your deck. That's an actual star. It draws a card, it's good. A lot of characters have blank stars, this one doesn't, and draw a card is pretty high up in terms of star effects. So on the whole, interesting investigator. I'm very excited about their design, and in particular, Nathaniel Cho has been an island in design pretty much since his starter deck got printed, right? There was the Nathaniel Cho deck, there was relatively little variance in it. Later down the line, you get like Runic Axe Nathaniel Cho, where instead of running boxing gloves, you just ran the axe because it was so good that it essentially did the same thing. And then you had like maybe 1 card in expansion that you would consider running in Cho, right? You would have Sweeping Kick, and I believe it was Beyond the Mountains of Madness. That's not the name of that expansion. Shows how much my tabletop enjoys me playing it, I guess. There'll be like 1 event per every other expansion that Nathaniel Cho is really hyped about. So seeing another event-based Guardian means that it's likely Nathaniel Cho gets a lot of support that they've kind of always needed, and I'm really grateful for that. That's a good thing. However, I bring that up as something where for any other class, if I were making this argument, I'd be really happy about it. But specifically in Guardian, right? Guardian is a class that my tabletop we have a problem with the Guardian design lately. For the sake of brevity, I'm going to cut out this little rant about Guardian design and make another video on it that I'll upload tomorrow. For now, just know that I really wish some recent Guardians cared more about using guns, and I feel like their original identity has largely been abandoned. Now, getting into their signature skill is determined. It's a 1 question mark skill, and if the skill test is successful and it's on an event you played, you may return determined to your hand instead of discarding it. I'm gonna be honest, I don't think that's remotely good. Like, it is just a 1 question mark you can use over and over and over again on your events, and that's cool. And that will definitely have some positive benefit over the course of a scenario. I don't doubt that at all. But it's also just like not something I'm hyped about at all, that it says essentially +1 to your event checks until you fail 1. Like, that's just not super interesting to me. And it's very random how much impact that'll actually get, because there's not really anything. It's possible we see cards late in the set that synergize with this, but It's not really anything individually to get hyped about. It's something that a Winifred would love, but in Marion, I don't really see the reason to be hyped for this. I just realized that in this image, instead of having a hook for a hand, she's holding a hook in her other hand, and it really broke my brain for a second. Anyway, her weakness is I'll do it myself. It goes into your threat area, and then anytime you play an event, you take 1 horror. Reminder, you have 6 horror soak. Lightning Bolt, discard 3 events from your hand, discard I'll do it myself. This is crippling. This is absolutely horrific, right? That is a huge amount of horror. You can't leave this in play, because anytime you're doing the thing you built your character to do, you're going to be taking a horror. You don't have a lot of horror soak, and you draw your deck pretty quickly, so you're gonna draw this weakness pretty quickly. It's not a thing that's just gonna happen sometimes like other Guardian weaknesses where you might finish a game without drawing Tommy's weakness because you have low draw. You will draw this, and it will be crippling. Discard 3 events from your hand is awful. It's absolutely brutal, and there's no way around it. Both of these suck, and it's going to suck to draw this. Does it break your character? Probably not. But since a lot of your draw does come from your ability to play events, it might actually be possible that you end up with a small hand, draw this instead of another event, and just have nothing. And I can only think of Winifred as another character that breaks as hard as this threatens to break Marion. Moving on to the Guardian cards, Marion's in the art, you know it's gonna be great for her. It's a 1-cost event, ready for anything, Spirit's Bold, play only as your first action, draw 1 card, 2 if you drew an enemy, then heal 1 horror. This action does not provoke attacks of opportunity. That's essentially just the horror variant of Second Wind. Instead of healing an extra damage, you draw an extra card. Instead of being triggered by treacheries, it's triggered by enemies. And the most important part, I would say, is that it doesn't trigger attacks of opportunity, making it infinitely easier to play as your first card. So this is a really solid card. I think that's fairly obvious. 1-cost cycle heal horror might just be staple in any Guardian deck. There are so many characters like Roland that see this and their mouth is watering. This is a very good card in general, especially in a character that is looking to have a ton of events to play. This is draw, this is events, it helps deal with I'll do it myself. This is 100% going in every single Marion deck, and it's probably going in a lot of other Guardian decks too. And the last card for Guardians in this first roundup is a 1-cost, 1-experience event called Hunter's Mark. Spell. It's a fast action, so that's always great. Attach it to an enemy at your location, only can attach 1 per enemy. Investigators get +1 fist while fighting this enemy, which is like fine, but that can't be the reason. That's gotta be a ribbon, right? Reaction, when damage is dealt to the attached enemy, discard Hunter's Mark, deal 1 additional damage to that enemy. Any investigator may trigger this ability. So that says Vicious Blow, doesn't it? This is better Vicious Blow, right? Because it's a question mark, so you can commit it on Mythos checks if you don't need the damage. If you're fighting dangerous enemies, this gives you 1 fist and 1 damage like Vicious Blow, but the fist can be recursive until the damage would kill it. There's possible synergies with like attaching stuff, but I think that's mostly a like survivor thing. I don't think there's a ton you can do here with that. This is really just jank Vicious Blow that cost a resource and an experience, and I'm not seeing a huge reason to run it. I mean, the reason, I guess, is because of this, right? After you play an event during your turn, this is a fast event that draws you a card and then triggers your action compression immediately. So you can do like Hunter's Mark into Sweeping Kick to start your turn and then just swing with the weapon 3 times. Like that's the thing that is specifically good about this. It's got a lot of action compression possibilities during a fight turn for Fighter Marion. I think for anyone other than Marion and possibly Cho. Like Cho doesn't need bonus fist though, that's the issue, right? Cho's either got Boxing Gloves swinging at 7 before his bonuses, or he's got Runic Axe swinging at ungodly numbers. He doesn't need this. But with Marion's 4 fist and event focus, I think this is a really good Marion card. Might even be one of the first things you buy. But for other characters, you look at this, you look at Vicious Blow, and you just don't spend the experience so that you can waste resources. There's not a reason to get this. Great in Marion though. Next up, moving into Seekers, our incredibly blurry image of Lucius Galloway. He's got 2 head, 4 book, 1 fist, and 5 foot. I guess we found the rogue. Yeah, that's exactly what I'd expect out of the rogue stat line. This is obviously very good. 2 head can be a bit rough, especially if you're playing one of the earlier campaigns that only test head, but 1 fist, you love to see it. 4 book, 5 foot is incredible. That's Monterey Jack. And Monterey Jack would have been one of the best characters in the game with Trish's card pool. This is the inverse of Trish's card pool, so you better believe this character is going to do some gross shit. I think that highly of Lucius Galloway just off of his stats. I should also mention 8 health, 6 horror, very normal numbers, just like Marion. Reaction, after you successfully evade an enemy at 2 or more, discover 1 clue at your location. Like, don't get me wrong, that's something that he'll have no issue doing, right? With access to stuff like hiking boots and Janae Beauregard and probably manual decks too, I imagine doing that's not hard. Even the Succeed by 2 part's not gonna be a big deal, and you could easily see this character getting support for the Succeed by 2 archetype, or for dodging, since their effect is reliant on it. I'm not hyped about it, because I will never be hyped about my Kluber spending an action to evade, especially if that requires them to engage a monster to do it, which they're never going to do, so they have to have drawn the enemy or have it be massive. Anything that says get a clue at your location as a free action is a good ability, but anything that says evade is a bad ability. This is just how I feel about the game. So the two sort of cancel each other out, and I think it still comes out to be very good. But you really want ways to evade that don't involve being engaged with the enemy. And the issue with that is, like, let's take breaking and entering, for example. It says you may automatically evade an enemy at this location. And to my understanding, there's no skill check where you set the value to, like, they have difficulty 0, you pass, no matter what you get, you don't pull a token. It's not like that. It's just they are evaded. And because of that, you're not succeeding by 2 or more. You're just doing a thing that evaded them. Same deal with Pendant of the Queen. You just set the guy to being evaded. Yeah, there's no skill test, you just automatically evade the enemy, and my understanding of that is there is no difference there, it just happens. So as a result, since it needs it to be by 2 or more, I don't think there's that many ways to do that without just directly evading a guy. Whatever the ways are, you're going to love them and probably go out of the way to put them in your deck as this character, but I'm not thrilled about doing that when I have access to Seeker 5. There's a lot of good stuff that doesn't involve using this foot stat, and mostly I look at this as just extreme Mythos resilience that I'm very happy to have, and then you use Higher Education to crutch your head stat, and you're very nearly Mythos immune just off of that one card. That's really all we have to say about Lucius. We don't have his card back, we don't have his signatures. We do have one more Seeker card though, which is Correlate all its contents. It's a 1-cost event and an insight. Investigate, you may cancel the first chaos token revealed for this skill test, return it to the bag, and reveal a new one. If you succeed, place 1 charge or secret on an asset controlled by any investigator at your location. If you succeed by exactly 1 or 3, place 2 charges or secrets on that asset instead. And I'm sort of feeling like all the Succeed by X support we've seen for Kate might have partly been like setting up the groundwork for Lucius when I see this card. Is this good? It's a 1-cost event that if it works, you get a clue. You can't autofill it unless you autofill twice. And then if you succeed by the right amounts, which it's pretty generous with having 2 options, you get 2 charges or secrets. And if you succeed by a different amount, you get 1. I mean, that's definitely good, right? Because like as a baseline level 0 scenario, you're just starting a campaign, you use this, you get the wrong token, but you pass the test because you negate an autofill. And then you put a charge on your your Mystic's Rite of Seeking, right? So essentially the charge is worth 2 clues. You got a clue if you negated an autofill, it only costs 1. This is just generically good without the last line. Oh, it's actually really good in Harvey, right? It's a normal event that you can play with Farsight to put charges on Pendant of the Queen while you're rapid cycling your deck. The issue is fitting it into a Harvey deck because there's so much shit you want in Harvey already. But that is a good Harvey card, and it's good in anyone who's rapid cycling a deck with Pendant of the Queen, which, you know, like all Seekers at least look at for a second. Yeah, I think this card's nuts. I think that's a very good card. I think at 1 experience, a Seeker would never really look too hard at this unless they built their deck around it. But at 0 experience, it's pretty pushed. I think this is a very good card. I don't know that most Seekers will run it. Like, most Seeker cards are competitive with this. Seeker's one of the strongest classes in the game. Let me rephrase that. Seeker is the strongest class in the game, so this card might not see play despite being really good, but especially if you're a team player and you've got a Mystic on your team, this is great. Like, just running Rite of Seeking and Daisy now that this exists is suddenly much more sensible. Anyone with access to Seeker cards in Mystic, so Marie, Luke, Gloria, they're all looking at this. They have to pass a normal book test though, so like maybe not as much as I had hoped they would. I think this is mostly a Seeker card. I don't think it uses much value. I don't think it sees much value outside of Seeker, but I think it's very good. Moving on to our 1 rogue card, it's Gatling Gun. And at first I was very negative on this card as a symptom of why are Guardians not getting guns? But now that I've gotten over that, let's talk about Gatling Gun, the 5 experience, 5 cost firearm for rogues. It's also just an item, a weapon, and illicit, all the tags you would expect. It has uses 12 ammo. I haven't really been talking a ton about the icons and what they commit for because like I'll go back through them. It's largely what you would expect. Seeker just randomly getting a head and a book instead of one on their event like you would expect, just higher value on their cards. Committing for a head, for a question mark. Like, these are largely what you would expect for their icons, and it's the same for the Gatling Gun. Like, yes, committing for 3 fists is a lot. It's a 5 experience card that you don't want to commit, so it makes sense that it does. It's also a manual dex. Please God, don't commit this for 1 book or 1 head. Like, you better be on death's door if you're using this to pass a crypt chill. Anyway, getting back into the card itself, 12 ammo, action, spend 1 to 6 ammo, fight. You get plus X for this attack. This difficulty for this attack is equal to the combined fight value of all enemies at your location. Instead of its standard damage, the attack deals X damage divided as you choose among enemies at your location. X is the amount of ammo spent on this ability's cost. So you spend 1 to 6 ammo, fight with plus 1 to 6 fist, and deal 1 to 6 damage, whatever you picked. However, it has to target every enemy at your location's combined fight value, which is pretty scary. Like, as an example, swarming is a pretty massive inherent counter to the Gatling Gun. For characters like the newly partially revealed mobster Michael McGlen and Tony, they don't really care about that. But for the dirty fighting based rogues like Finn and Skids, I'm not sure they can really get away with playing Gatling Gun. It's a huge experience cost. They probably still need dirty fighting to reliably use it. And at some point, like, you just get the Switchblade because it's lower experience and gets online faster if your fist is low enough for the Gatling Gun to be awkward. I think they might be able to use it depending on what other support we see, but it's definitely worth noting that the combined fight value on some rogues, read not Tony and Michael, is going to be concerning. Let's talk about how valuable this is. First of all, in terms of just action per damage, it is the highest rate in the game at 6 damage per action. And you can feasibly spend like 6 actions in 1 turn just unloading this. You can Gatling Gun, just shoot it twice with its base 12, swift reload, shoot it twice with a Leo DeLuca action, and then use one of the many other ways of rogues have of getting actions. Let's say you have a haste in play and you use a quick thinking. You use your second swift reload and you empty 12 ammo again and just deal a cool 36 damage in 1 turn. Goodbye Cthulhu, right? Realistically, that's Disneyland. That's never going to happen. But it's very normal to see like a boss spawn, you use a swift reload and you pump over 12 damage to it in 1 turn. Just reliably, consistently. So in terms of output and tempo, this is really high. It does require cards like Swift Reload. It does require cards like Contraband. And there's really no way to get a crazy ammo stack on it unless you get lucky enough to have the free time to play double Contraband. Which, with Contraband being expensive, Gatling Gun being expensive, you'll probably be using the Gatling Gun, so you'll likely need to have had a Swift Reload in your hand. You empty the Gatling Gun, Swift Reload, Contraband. Like, there's so many moving pieces that even getting a second Contraband onto a fully loaded gun seems like a little bit Disneyland to me. This is not a thing where you can reliably just use one Gatling Gun for an entire scenario. You'll likely be using both Contrabands, both Swift Reloads, and both Gatling Guns to just barely get through a scenario. But I do think it is a big gun that is sufficient to get through the whole scenario, just like Flamethrower. It's just going to require the rest of the support for its archetype, and it's very possible, with this getting printed, that we see more support than what we currently have, and it goes from this will probably work to this will definitely work. And being a 5 experience gun that costs 5 resources, it does have to be your sole weapons platform. You can't be like, oh, I'll use Gatling Gun, and when it runs out of ammo, I'll take out a Switchblade. Like, no, just if you're doing that, you've gone off the rails. This needs to be the one thing your deck does, and it needs to work on this. And sure, you can have some backup weapons or draw consistency, but you don't ever want to give up Gatling Gun for a different weapon once it goes into play. The big issue for this on lower fist fighters would be like if you have a 3-fist, 2-health enemy, that's going to be a bit awkward for a Skids to deal with, right? You use 2 ammo, you get +2, you're at 5 to 3, you're only up 2. You don't want to be spending a 5 experience, 5 resource weapon to fail on a -3, right? That's just awkward as hell. I think generally speaking, that if you're using this, your character, even on Skids and Finn, will likely be built in a way where you're reliably beating every fist check unless something ridiculous is happening, like swarming cards, which is campaign dependent and you know not to pick Gatling Gun, or you just get a crazy enemy pile up in 1 turn, you all draw enemies, or you draw 2 enemies on the same turn, then a boss spawn, stuff like that. And the real question is, this thing where you test against all enemies at your location, how often is that going to be a major problem that a rogue cannot solve? And the answer should basically be never, right? Like, if that does happen, you have somebody engage the deep one bull and just walk it out of the location, right? And then the fight value goes down by 4, and yeah, that sucks that you had to play it that way, but there should be solutions. I don't think this is ever going to be like a damning problem where you have to fight every enemy at once, but it is definitely a thing that's going to be a hang up that I think if you play a campaign with Gatling Gun, at least once you'll have a scenario where you have to figure out how to get through like 3 enemies at the same time, and it's problematic because just +6 isn't enough. I say that, at +6, baseline Tony and Michael are fighting 11. That's still up 2 against 3 3-fist enemies, right? I still expect this to be a problem. I don't know how it's going to be, but I look at this, and just like Flamethrower can only attack engaged enemies, like, oh, you engage enemies all the time. You don't want to shoot over her 4 damage anyway. Are you trying to kill your teammates? Just like the engage clause on Flamethrower shouldn't be a big deal, it always, at least once in the campaign, comes up that a turn gets super awkward because of it. I think Gatling Gun will have the same thing. I think it's absolutely a top tier gun. I think it's on par with or better than Flamethrower, to be honest. But I'm interested in seeing how good it actually is in play because it's hard to visualize just looking at it. It's what the bar wanted to be, and it is so much better than the bar. Coming down to Mystic, we have 2 different versions of Agatha Crane that are identical on the front except for their color. And without an explanation for this having been given to me, I'm going to assume that means they have different rules on the back of their card, and I'm interested in seeing what they are. Right now, we can just go over the front of it, and we can safely assume that they're going to have some really interesting deck building options across the 2 different versions. They are 4 head, 4 book, 1 fist, 3 foot, also called a completely optimal stat line if you're a Seeker, and a pretty decent stat line if you're a Mystic. She has, again, standard soak 6 and 8, reaction when your turn ends. If you sealed, canceled, or ignored 1 or more chaos tokens this round, play a spell or insight event from your discard pile. After it resolves, remove it from the game. So if you're doing anything to seal, cancel, or ignore tokens, essentially the Jacqueline archetype, which again, I love to see support. This is the same thing where they're going back to the starter deck and printing more for Jacqueline. I love seeing that get supported. And the effect of doing it, that you engage in this archetype, you get to fast play a spell or event. This is inherently not good for fighting because you're doing it at the end of a turn. So even though Mystic could reliably run Mystic fighting archetype, you wouldn't want to with this ability because it's giving you value once you're done fighting. Or not done fighting, but like you had to take your turn with the enemy still alive to get value from a fight effect, right? Spells and insights are both very common types of events within these 2 colors. Deep knowledge is an insight, read the signs is a spell. I feel like there's just tons of them. I don't want to go look through all of them. This seems really strong. For a Mystic, I think it's like more obviously strong. Mystics never cycle their deck. For a Seeker, Seekers often do cycle their deck, and a lot of the time they're intentionally cycling their deck and building a deck with like Pendant of the Queen being in the deck just to lower the deck size on the second cycle so they can cycle faster and faster as they go. So this might actually be even more powerful in Seeker, where you intentionally run insight events to mill them out of your deck, and then you're pretty much just left with like deduction 2 on your weaknesses. And if the game goes long at all, then you get clues at an unreasonable speed. It's also just obviously good. It's action compression on things that will draw cards and get clues. Like I think this is transparently really, really good. It's just a matter of how reliably you hit this trigger. And I have to assume that with a character coming out, there will be support for the archetype sufficient to reliably hit this trigger like at least every other turn. I'm hyped. I like this. I like this a lot. Anyway, effect star +2. You may cancel this token and draw another in its place if you do draw a card. That's really good. It triggers your ability, and then you also get to draw a card. That's just great. That's a wonderful star. That is so far from blank. That is top tier. There are few that are that good. Coming down to our signatures, we have Ocula Obscura, the esoteric eyepiece. It's a 3-cost asset, takes up your accessory slot, item tool, and science. Reaction after you succeed at a skill test. If no tokens are sealed here, seal a non-symbol token revealed during the skill test on Ocula Obscura limit once per phase. Force when you would reveal a token from the chaos bag, resolve the token sealed here instead, then release that token. All right, yeah, that means your ability just goes off constantly. You pull anything that's not a symbol, you seal it which likely guarantees your next test is a pass, by the way, because it wasn't, like, unless you're sealing -4s and then going into Mythos phase, or on a harder difficulty, sealing -5s, -8s, that sort of shit. Like, you wouldn't want to seal those. You have the option not to. You are reliably getting what is essentially a guaranteed success on your next action that triggers your ability. That's incredible. That is such a good signature card. Is there a weakness as bad as that is good? That's the question. Glimpse the Void, weakness, blunder, insight. Put it into play in your threat area. The first time you reveal 1 or more chaos tokens during each skill test, you must reveal 1 additional chaos token and resolve its effects. Action, shuffle it back into your deck. So that's an immediate action tax, and it can be recursive. Because, like, you're gonna keep drawing it. So what you do, you build the Seeker deck, and you just let this sit on your board, and you run like 2 magnifying glasses and 3 book boost allies, so you just beat the bag anyway with 2 tokens. That probably doesn't work on harder difficulties, but on normal it does. It does double your chance of auto-fail if you try to do that, right? This seems deeply frustrating to me. I feel like I'd be very annoyed by this weakness. Because, like, obviously she has Seeker access. I assume that she'll always have some Seeker access and you're not choosing all or nothing, yellow or purple. And if you have Seeker access, a weakness that can only ever be shuffled back into your deck is, like, not actually a solution. I don't think this is a damning weakness at all. I just fundamentally think this effect isn't that bad on normal difficulty. And on higher difficulties, you just shuffle it back in. Like, higher difficulties are inherently more brutal. You play your draw cards first, then you shuffle this in. I don't like this weakness. I feel like I personally would hate to play with it because it's like, it grinds my gears as a player, but in terms of absolute value, how harsh is it actually? I don't think it's that bad. And our last card for Mystics is Whispers of Doom, a 3-cost event, spell, and cursed. Parlay, choose a non-weakness enemy at your location and test 3 head, plus X difficulty, where X is the enemy's horror value. If you succeed, defeat that enemy or deal it 3 damage instead if it is elite. That is wonderful. Good. Great job. You did the thing where instead of saying it only works on non-elites, you just made it deal damage to elites. This is how the fight version of Shadow Light works. This is how every card like this needs to work for them to be good. I'm very happy to see it being written this way. If you fail, place 1 Doom on that enemy. That part's alarming. This is just a good fight event, right? This is just like Knife Hands. This is Spectral Razor. 3-cost event, I think Knife Hands is either 2 or 3. I think Read the Signs is 2 and Spectral Razor is 3. Parlay a 3 head test plus horror value. That sounds generally about the same difficulty as a normal fight value for most enemies, right? Like, very rarely will that be a 5 or higher. I will say that it's harder to succeed than Knife Hands because you don't get the bonus of your fight stat. But also, a failure on the parlay does nothing bad. Well, it places a Doom on that enemy, but presumably, you can find a way to deal with the enemy and not have that matter. I like Whispers of Doom. I like having cards that compete with Spectral Razor, but I also just, like, don't know that this sees that much play. I don't like running events that cost 3 in Mystic, because Mystic is a super expensive class. I don't like running events that put Doom when I fail. I don't like running events where it's really important that I succeed because of how effective it is, encouraging me to spend skills on the event and kind of 2-for-1 myself. And to some degree, all of this is me saying I don't like running events. Like, the extra words at the end are all just generally applicable to events. But this is a moderately difficult test with high value and high risk that you want to succeed and you want to spend skills on in a class with bad economy. I'm sure the one that's part Seeker doesn't really mind. They'll be able to figure that out. But Whispers of Doom is pretty good. It's definitely a strong event, and I think it's more that I'm not hyped about expensive events in Mystic than I am negative on the card. I think it's just a state of Mystic's economy that makes me sad about this, and some good Mystic economy would probably make this go from, like, good, but I'm probably not going to play it, to a very real consideration in any fighting Mystic I ever play. It's just an economy issue, really. Moving on to George Barnaby, I'm kind of left scratching my head considering he's the lawyer. He's also a civic drifter, which would imply he's like the homeless lawyer. Anyway, he's got 2 head, 4 book, 3 fist, and 3 foot, which feels uniquely bad. I think most Survivor stat lines are better than this. This is like Bob. Wait, no, this is Bob. Oh shit, that's not good. That's Bob's stat line. And Bob's stat line is not good at all. It is one of the weak parts of Bob, and this stat line is also not good. There aren't many 4-book survivors, so that is actually a kind of uniquely good thing about him. And Survivor of all classes will probably be the best off with bad Mythos stats, but wasting 3 in a tertiary stat's very bad. And unlike Guardian, where I've come to expect it, I actually expect unique and powerful stat lines from Survivors, and this is certainly not it. Anyway, your max hand size is equal to the number of face-down cards beneath George Barnaby, limit 5 cards, so you're starting the game with a max hand size of 0. How quickly can I fill them up? You may commit face-down cards beneath George Barnaby to skill tests as if they were in your hand. That's really cool. So actually your hand size is 10 cards, and then when you use them it goes down to 8 and 6, and let's not worry about that. Your max hand size is functionally bigger than someone else as long as you're committing the cards under you. I have to reread this one. Reaction: after you discard a card from your hand, place it face down beneath George Barnaby, then draw 1 card. Limit once per phase. For a second I thought we were playing Agatha. I just missed that last part. I was like, oh, you just put your whole hand under yourself, commit all of them during your turn, and then you do it again. You just make the skill deck. And I was super hyped, and now that it's limit once per phase, what you need to do is have a bunch of discard cards hemorrhaging out of your hand, ideally discarding other cards with high skills on them to put under you. So like during your turn, you put 1 under you. During upkeep, you overdraw and put 1 under you. That's kind of it. The most you're doing is 2 per round. You need a really high tempo deck to make this guy work, it feels like. Like turn 1, you want to discard a card, put it under you, play 2 assets, upkeep, discard a card, put it under you. I can see this thing not being restrictive. And because it's not restrictive, it's essentially saying draw 1 to 2 extra cards per turn. And your hand is weird, but you have it. And your skills cannot be discarded because they're under you. They're actually protected, which is pretty good. 7/7's great soak, by the way. Pretty much only survivors get that most of the time. Very happy with that. I need to see what George Barnaby's deck building is, and what his signatures are, and what sort of support he's getting, because this needs discard support to really be good. I need a card that lets me discard something else from my hand for an impact. Something like cornered, but not specifically cornered. And if I can get some more cornered type assets in the game, I'm super hyped about this. But if I'm just like playing a card that discards itself to put it under me, I'm not nearly as excited for that. I think this is good. I think this is reliably plus 1 to 2 cards per turn. And I think that this encourages you to play a high tempo book-based survivor, which is like, you know, other than Daryl, nobody does that. And Daryl's still relatively new, and he's got 2 archetypes fairly unique to him that this guy's not pushed towards at all. So yeah, I'm very interested in George Barnaby now that I've actually thought about him a lot. We've seen 1 survivor card so far. It's a 1 cost 2 experience event, the upgraded improvised weapon, tactic, and improvised. You may play it from your discard pile. If you do, you shuffle it into your deck after resolving it and draw a card. That second part's really good. The attacked enemy gets -2 fight for this attack. If you play it from your discard pile, it deals +1 damage. So for the purpose of fighting, this essentially means you're attacking at base 5, unless it's got 2 or under fight, in which case it's a guaranteed hit, barring auto-fail. Am I gonna be making a deck as George Barnaby, where I am using my fist to fight? No. Will I be making a deck where I use my fist to flex fight? Maybe. But like 2 cost for this event, I've got to cycle my deck pretty fast for me to think this is a core part of how I'm fighting. Otherwise, I just upgrade other things first, it feels like. There's so many good cards in Survivor that don't cost a lot. They tend to be your earlier priority, stuff like out of Crossroads. I don't think this is a bad card. I'm actually surprised at how good this looks. Like any short supply fighter, like a Yorick, isn't super upset about this. It's a way to fight, like while you have a chainsaw in your hands, it'll deal +2 damage, or 2 damage total rather, and then it draws a card. Like this is fine in any Survivor fighter that was running short supply already. I don't know if it encourages flex fighting with a weird stat line like this on George though. I'm interested in improvised weapon. This line right here, draw a card, that's really important. If it didn't do that, I wouldn't think it was very good. But because it's drawing that extra card, I think improvised weapon is actually pretty solid. And now let's go to my like most disappointing part of this expansion so far. It's the specialist cards. Specialist cards are really, really cool in theory. When my table saw these cards, we all like unanimously said, holy shit, why didn't they already exist? This is so obvious. We should have been doing this for years. Specialist cards all have this line at the top. Miskatonic or Scholar deck only, limit 1 per deck, and if you come up, you'll notice he's a Civic Drifter. He can't run it. She Agatha Crane is a Miskatonic Scholar, so she can run this card. It's the traits on your investigator determine if you can run these cards. It's a really good mechanic. I'm glad to see it. The issue is that all of them suck. They're all terrible. So let's read through the ones we've seen so far. This one's a 2-cost asset, slotless, and it costs 1 experience to put in your deck. You can only run the 1. Lightning Bolt, during your turn, if there is no asset attached to the library pass, spend 1 resource. Attach a tome asset from your hand to this card. The attached asset takes up no slots, limit 1 attached asset. So right now, it's absolutely insane. If you stop reading there, probably one of the most broken cards you've ever seen. Forced, when your turn ends, place the attached asset on the bottom of your deck. Now, I'm gonna help you out with some card game theory real quick. The difference in discard the attached asset and put it on the bottom of your deck is essentially nothing. There is no meaningful distance between the two unless you have a way to specifically draw the bottom card of your deck or search it out. One of the cooler things I thought about Library Pass is because it discards the attached asset, you can play around it a little bit. You can use Library Pass, put a tome into play for free, and then swap it with a library docent to essentially rob the library. The issue is that there's no way to get it off of the library docent other than to put it back on the Library Pass. So again, not super valuable. The biggest thing might be like a way to try to cheese a Necronomicon, because like, of course, every time something does stuff with tomes, you can do that. You use Research Librarian to rip it off the bottom of your deck, you put it into play with this. If you're not immediately dumping the whole Necronomicon, which you probably should be, you can steal it from the library with a docent, and then once you're done, you put it back on, put it on the bottom, and you use your second librarian to get it out again. And that's all, you know, neat and cool. There's definitely gonna be something broken with this in evolving the Necronomicon, I can guarantee that. But that's more on the Necronomicon than this card. With most other tomes, this essentially says it's a 2-cost asset that costs an experience to put in your deck. You put it into play. You spend an action and 2 resources doing this. Then, as a Lightning Bolt, you can spend a resource to use a tome without paying for it, and then discard it immediately. You are spending an action and 2 resources so that in future turns, you can spend a resource to discard a card from your hand for a very temporary benefit. This card is a reverse engine. This is a way to hemorrhage every tome out of your hand and onto the bottom of your deck immediately. It does not in any way seem beneficial to me. And one of the few things I can think of is if you have multiple tomes, you can get in a situation where your deck is just 3 tomes, you never draw cards, you never deck out, you never take horror. This sounds terrible to me, but it's neat that you can do it. Library Pass feels like 8 different rabbit holes and they all end with you made your deck worse. Unless you went down the Necronomicon rabbit hole, and that's really less to do with Library Pass and more to do with a card that has 5 different lightning bolts on it. I hope I'm wrong about Library Pass, I really do. But this just screams jump through hoops to burn the cards in my hand. And like as a seeker, you can afford to do that, to be honest. But still, I don't feel any enthusiasm about this. This looks like a card that is just a trap. Moving on to True Awakening, this one is a 2 experience, 0-cost event. Insight Spirit, Blessed, Chosen, and Drifter only. And you can choose to resolve 2 of the following in any order. Draw 2 cards, discover 1 clue at your location. Words are hard. Discover 1 clue at your location, heal 1 damage, heal 1 horror. So if you spend 2 experience to heal 1 damage and horror, this card's terrible. That's not why you put it in your deck. You might use it for that. You might be happy it's there if you're about to die. Realistically, every time you play this, it says draw 2 cards, discover 1 clue at your location. So the question is a 2 experience, 0-cost event to draw 2 cards and discover a clue at your location good enough? Yeah, probably. I don't know that this is a priority buy in anyone, but especially in like, oh, it's Blessed, Chosen, Drifter. Based on like the name and the art, I thought it would be more to do with spells. Mystics would like this, right? Draw 2, get a clue, 0 cost. Mystics would love this event. How many Mystics have any of these tags? Amina Zidane is Chosen. Father Mateo's not Blessed, he's a believer. Oh my fucking God. Luke Robinson's a homeless drifter. Okay, he gets it. The one guy with secret access that didn't need it. Lily Chen can run it. And honestly, Guardian kind of likes 0-cost draw cards too. Kohaku's Blessed, he would be willing to run it. So like very few Mystics actually get this. But seeing that did make me realize Guardians like this card a lot. Typically, if you're a fighter guardian, you don't get to spend experience on anything for the first 30 experience of your deck. You have to get your weapons and your stick plans and your upgraded guard dogs. There's a lot of stuff that you need immediately just to do your job. But 2 experience, draw 2 cards is pretty solid. Of course, as a guardian, you could just spend 1 more experience and upgrade Stand Together level 3, so probably better off doing that unless you just desperately need the draw. What about Marion? Is Marion Blessed, Chosen, or Drifter? It seems like she could be one of those. Yeah, she's a Drifter, thought so. So I think that True Awakening is actually very likely to see some play in some decks. Just because 0 cost event, draw 2 cards, and get a clue for 2 experience is really solid. However, the people who get this is very hard to nail down at a glance. I like True Awakening. It's gonna make me so sad every time I ask myself, hey, can I run True Awakening? And it turns out I'm not Chosen, because Chosen's is kind of hard tag to predict who's gonna have. But yeah, I like this card. Of all of the specialist cards, I think this is the one most likely to see play. It's just that for dedicated fighters, it's hard to get this experience early. I mean, of course I like this card, right? I hate this card because it's discarding my hand for very temporary benefits that tomes just don't seem like they're worth using for. This is like a neutral draw card. Of course I'm gonna like this one, but I do genuinely think it's a pretty solid card. Let's talk about Nose to the Grindstone. It's 3 experience, the most expensive one so far, though we'll beat it shortly. 2 costs. It's for criminals, drifters, and entrepreneurs, but let's be honest, it's really just for Wilson Richards. Lightning Bolt during a skill test on a tool asset, exhaust Nose to the Grindstone. You get +2 skill value for this skill test. If this skill test fails, either replenish 1 supply on that asset or gain 1 resource. This doesn't say on a tool asset you control. Does this mean you can use Nose to the Grindstone on someone else's test? And the you would be implicitly the person taking the test? I'm going to assume it's not supposed to do that, but I think it does read that way currently. Point being, +2 skill value once a turn, like hell yeah, give me Unexpected Courage every turn for the proactive thing I'm doing. That's obviously good. If it fails, get a supply back, yeah. Stupid Flex Wilson Richards with his fingerprint kits would love that. That's obviously very good. Gain a resource if you don't need it somehow. This is obviously good in Wilson Richards if you have 3 experience to spare, which I'm not sure it's going to be easy to get this early. Especially a second copy of it, which Wilson would definitely want a second copy of it, and I'm not sure anyone else wants the first. I wish it was like 1 or 2 experience and less good. 3 experience is such a big ask for the 1 gimmick investigator that really wants this. That's how I feel about this. I want to be wrong. I'm like, Nose to the Grindstone's this insane card that's worth building around, but I just do not see it. It's a card that allows you to be better at one thing in a one way, and almost nobody wants it. I'm sad about it. I'm not going to talk about it anymore. Let's talk about Archibald McVey. He's a 5 experience ally, so he'd better be good. He's the beleaguered lecturer and ally. Surprised he's a lecturer with no other traits than just ally, but anyway. Assistant, reporter, or scholar. He gets 4 secrets. He gives you +1 book. Guess he's meant for seekers. Secrets on assets you control may be spent as resources to pay for insight events you... Oh no, it's this guy. I remembered hating this guy when I first saw him with my tabletop group when we were reading this together. I didn't remember what he did. I just knew I didn't like it. That's god awful. Jesus Christ. Okay, let me break it down. 5 experience, 1 book. We're getting that at 0 with 2 different guys in Seeker, right? This is like Christopher Milan with +1/1 soak. So for 5 experience and losing his ability, so the 1/1 soak was a net loss, that's what we're getting. And obviously assistant, reporter, scholar can be used outside of yellow, probably. Those all sound like really yellow traits, and I'd be shocked if anyone outside of yellow had them, but that's not the point. Even assuming that you can get this outside of yellow, you can probably still get +1 book in better ways than spending 5 experience and all of your starting income on this dude. So this effect has to be crazy. This is a 5 experience effect. It has to be good. Secrets on assets you control may be spent as resources to pay for insight events you play. So first of all, this guy costs 4 fucking resources. You have to do this a lot just to break even. Second of all, if you go through all of the assets with secrets, there aren't very many that are both cheap and have a lot of secrets. Forbidden Knowledge is kind of it, and it already turns the secrets into resources. That's what they're for. But lastly, the real nail in the coffin for Archibald. The reason that he's so damn tired is that the thing you're paying for are inside events. If you don't know, those are usually Seeker events that cost next to nothing in the first place. So Seekers are the ones getting the events that you actually play with this. Seekers who already had a good economy, Seekers who didn't need this card, and an event type that doesn't cost that much in the first place. I'd be hard pressed to make a deck that even had enough inside events in it to make this guy pay for himself. Because again, at 4, you're break even. At like 10, he's generated 6 resources for 5 experience, that's not enough. You need a deck with like 15 resources, probably more of inside events, and then somehow the secrets to pay for them for this guy to be remote. It's baffling, it's terrible. Like if you have a deck that needs this guy, good luck in session 1, where you don't have this guy and you just have a million secret assets and can't afford any of your shit. This card is terrible. This card is, I would say, one of the worst allies in the game. Just absolutely god-awful. I will not sugarcoat it. This is a mistake. Something went wrong in the design process, and we are left with Archibald McVey. And lastly, we have this spread image of all of the people coming out this expansion. There's some notable stuff here. One, Gloria Goldberg is actually in this expansion, and that's why we have like the weird double color character. It's because Gloria is the official mystic for this expansion. Which also, that's how you support Gloria, by making a character that actually does the Gloria thing. She's gonna be even more broken than she already is. But there's one person here we haven't seen so far. They haven't even had their front revealed. It's Michael McGlen, the gangster. And that's the fight version of Mandy. 3 head, 1 book, 5 fist, 3 foot. That is an incredible stat line. Now, I could be wrong, but I feel pretty confident about what Michael McGlen's front card actually says. His reaction is after you spend an ammo from an asset you control, gain 1 resource, right? You don't gain cards. Probably this is once per round, and if you shoot a gun, you get paid for it. You're a gangster, you're a gun for hire. Makes sense. As for his star, its effect, something something, 1 ammo, something something you control. Something something. Odds are it is an effect of like +1 or something, some minor star effect. They've been pretty good about star effects on all these other guys. And the rest of it is you may place 1 ammo on 1 firearm asset you control, which would be a really good star. I'm assuming that's what the front of him is. That would make a lot of sense. It's flavorfully on point. It's not insanely overpowered, but it is very good. As for the back of him, I've got no idea. Nobody does. We can safely assume that he either has Rogue 5 or Illicit 5 or Firearm 5, because obviously Gatling Gun was printed for him. I think if anyone was going to get the Finn illicit restriction, it should have been Michael McGlen, but we know he doesn't because Finn already exists. I'm not sure what to expect out of his back, but I expect Michael McGlen to be very, very good. Will he be as good as Tony? Maybe. Not getting an action to fight every turn does suck a little bit, but Tony is typically better off with a Switchblade because he has so many actions and allows him to divide his stuff up evenly, get online faster. I think generally Tony is better without big guns, and this guy is obviously designed around big guns, which are getting pushed pretty hard with the Gatling gun. I think Michael McGlen's gonna be very good. He's gonna be comparable to Tony. I don't know if he'll be a little bit better. That seems unlikely. He might be the same level. That's what I'm looking towards. I'm expecting him to be better at fighting, but worse at drawing, and as a consequence, worse at getting online quickly, and generally higher output once fully set up. His stat line's just really good.